When a disgraced rancher hears a child's desperate whisper from behind iron bars, he makes a promise that will force him to choose between survival and salvation. In a town where orphans are auctioned like livestock and the law serves the highest bidder, one man's refusal to look away ignites a battle against a system built on cruelty. Can justice be found when the powerful write the contracts and silence is survival? This is a story of redemption forged in dust and defiance, where a broken promise could mean death, but keeping it might just rebuild two shattered lives. Watch until the end to see how one impossible choice changes everything. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The sun hung merciless over Carson Flats, turning the dirt streets to powder and the afternoon air to something you could chew. Ethan Cole moved through the sparse midday traffic with his head down and his hat brim low, the way a man walks when he's learned that being noticed costs more than it's worth. His boots kicked up small clouds with each step, settling on denim worn thin at the knees and a work shirt that had seen better years. So had he. 3 years ago, he'd owned land. Good land. 160 acres of grass and creek water up in the Northern Territory, cattle that knew his voice, a barn he'd built with his own hands, and lumber he'd hauled himself. He'd had a name people respected, a handshake that meant something, a future that looked solid as fence posts. Then the fever took his wife in the space of a week. Then the drought came and stayed 2 summers. Then the banker called in notes Ethan didn't remember signing, with interest rates that climbed like late summer heat. By the time he understood what was happening, the land was gone, the cattle were gone, and his name was Mud. Now he worked day labor when he could get it, hauling freight, mucking stables, digging wells for men who wouldn't meet his eyes. He slept in a shack at the edge of town that leaked when it rained and creaked in the wind, ate beans and hardtack, and told himself it was temporary. Told himself he'd find a way back. He was passing the territorial courthouse when he heard it. A voice, thin and young and threaded through with fear, so raw it stopped him in his tracks. Please, please don't let them sell me. Ethan turned. The courthouse sat squat and official at the end of Main Street, white paint peeling in the heat, windows blank as a judge's stare. Behind it, barely visible from the street, was the holding area, a fenced yard with a single iron-barred cell used for drunks, drifters, and occasionally prisoners awaiting transport. He shouldn't look, shouldn't get involved. Every instinct honed by 3 years of survival screamed at him to keep walking. He looked anyway. The boy was maybe 8 years old, 9 at most. Small for his age, all elbows and knees, with dark hair that stuck up in wild tufts and a face smudged with dirt and something darker, bruises, fresh enough to still show purple beneath the grime. He gripped the bars with both hands, pressed so close his face was half shadowed by iron. Their eyes met. The boy's were brown, wide, desperate in a way that had nothing to do with childhood and everything to do with knowing exactly how bad things could get. Please, the boy whispered again. They're going to sell me tomorrow, at the auction, like I'm a horse. Ethan's throat went tight. He glanced toward the courthouse door, then back at the boy. What's your name, son? Ben. Ben Fletcher. The words came fast, tumbling over each other. My pa died last winter. Ma got sick after. The county said we owed money for the medicine, for the burial, for I don't know what all. They said I got to work it off, but Mr. Hale, he bought the debt. Now he says I belong to him until I turn 18. That's 9 more years. 9 years. Ethan felt something cold settle in his gut. There's laws, he said slowly, against that kind of thing. Not here, Ben's voice cracked. Not in the territories. They call it contract labor. Say it's legal if there's debt involved. Mr. Hale's got the papers, got the judge's signature and everything. His fingers tightened on the bars. Tomorrow he's selling me to the highest bidder. Whoever wants a boy who can work and won't run because there's nowhere to run to. The sun beat down. Somewhere down the street, a horse stamped in blue. A woman's laugh drifted from the mercantile, bright and careless. Ethan should walk away. Should keep his head down and his mouth shut like he'd learned to do. This wasn't his fight, wasn't his problem. He had nothing, no money, no influence, no standing in this town or any other. Getting involved would be stupid at best, dangerous at worst. He looked at the boy's face, saw the hope dying there, replaced by the dull resignation of someone learning that the world was exactly as cruel as it seemed. "What time's the auction?" Ethan heard himself ask. "Noon, tomorrow." Ben swallowed hard. You can't do nothing. Nobody can. Mr. Hale owns half this town. The law don't touch him." "Maybe." Ethan pulled his hat off, ran a hand through hair gone shaggy from too long between cuts. "Maybe not." He shouldn't promise. Shouldn't give this boy hope when he had no plan, no resources, nothing but a burning certainty that what he was hearing was wrong in a way that went deeper than law or custom or territorial jurisdiction. But he thought about his wife, about the fever that took her while he watched helpless, about his land slipping through his fingers because he didn't understand the fine print, didn't know how men like bankers and lawyers could turn handshakes into nooses, about all the times he'd needed someone to stand up when it mattered and nobody had. "Listen to me, Ben." He stepped closer to the bars, close enough to see the tear tracks cutting through the dirt on the boy's face. "I'm going to find a way to stop this. I don't know how yet, but I give you my word, you will not be sold tomorrow." "You can't promise that." But Ben's voice shook with something that might have been hope. "Just did." Ethan settled his hat back on his head. "You hold on one more night. Can you do that?" Ben nodded, quick and jerky. "Good." Ethan stepped back. "I'll see you tomorrow." He walked away before the boy could ask questions he couldn't answer, before he could think too hard about what he'd just done. His shadow stretched long in front of him, a thin dark line pointing toward trouble he couldn't see yet, but knew was coming. He needed information, needed to understand exactly what he was up against. The Brass Bell sat on the corner of Main and 3rd, a saloon that never quite closed and never quite got respectable. Ethan pushed through the doors into dim coolness and the smell of whiskey, sawdust, and tobacco. A few men sat scattered at tables, nursing drinks in the quiet afternoon lull. The bartender was a man named Sullivan, 50 years old with a face like worn leather and eyes that missed nothing. He'd known Ethan back when, before the fall. Never said much about it either way, which was a kind of mercy. "Ethan." Sullivan nodded, already reaching for a glass. "Whiskey?" "Information." Ethan leaned against the bar. "What do you know about Rourke Hale?" Sullivan's hand paused. He set the glass down carefully, studied Ethan's face. "You don't want to know about Rourke Hale." "Wouldn't ask if I didn't." A long silence. Sullivan poured 2 fingers of whiskey, slid the glass across. "On the house. You're going to need it." Ethan left the whiskey untouched. Waited. "Rourke Hale came to Carson Flats about 5 years back," Sullivan said finally, keeping his voice low. "Had money from somewhere east, St. Louis maybe, or Chicago. Started buying up land, making loans, setting up contracts. Real friendly at first, helpful even. Town needed capital, he had it. Seemed like a fair deal. And then people started losing things. Missing payments by a day and finding out their loan terms had changed. Discovering debts they didn't remember accruing, suddenly owing twice what they borrowed." Sullivan's jaw tightened. "Hale's got lawyers. Real ones from back east. Everything's legal, all signed and notarized, but legal don't mean right." "He's buying up debt contracts," Ethan said, "including ones involving children." Sullivan's eyes went flat. "You heard about the auction." "Heard about it. Met one of the boys." "Then you know this ain't new. Hale's been running these contract labor sales for 2 years now. Orphans, mostly. Sometimes children whose parents got sick, died, left debts. Territory law's fuzzy on it. Calls it indentured service. Says it's legal if there's legitimate debt and the contract's properly filed." He shook his head. "It's slavery by another name, but the paperwork's clean." "Who buys them?" "Ranchers needing hands they don't gotta pay. Minors. Couple went to a freight company out of Cheyenne. One girl ended up in a brothel in Denver before the marshal there shut it down and sent her back." Sullivan's voice had gone hard as creek ice. "Hale don't care where they end up. He just takes his cut and moves on to the next one." Ethan's hands curled into fists. "The sheriff is in Hale's pocket. So's the mayor and half the town council." Sullivan leaned forward. "Listen to me, Ethan. I know that look. I know you got a good heart under all that hurt you're carrying, but this ain't a fight you can win. Hale's got money, power, and the law on his side. You got nothing. I got a promise I made to a scared kid. Ethan pushed back from the bar. Where can I find Hale? Ethan, where? Sullivan sighed. He's got an office above the land registry, but walking in there with no plan is a good way to end up in the same cell as that boy, or worse. Then I better think of a plan. Ethan touched his hat brim. Thanks, Sullivan. For what? Trying to talk sense into a stubborn fool? But there was something in Sullivan's eyes that might have been respect. Watch your back. Hale's got men who do his dirty work. You start making noise, they'll come for you. Let them try. The bravado lasted until Ethan was back on the street, walking toward the land registry building. Then the weight of what he was doing settled over him like a soaked blanket. He had no money, no influence, no legal standing. He was about to confront a man who owned half the town and controlled the law, with nothing but anger and a promise he had no way to keep. The land registry occupied the ground floor of a 2-story brick building that was the fanciest structure in Carson Flats. The second floor belonged to Rourke Hale. Ethan climbed the outside stairs, boot heels ringing on wood, and found himself facing a door with frosted glass and gold lettering, Hale Enterprises. Land, loans, contracts. He knocked. Come. The office was cool and dark after the street's glare. Heavy curtains filtered the sunlight. A massive desk dominated the room, polished wood gleaming. Behind it sat a man in his 40s, clean-shaven, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than Ethan made in 6 months. His hair was slicked back, his hands soft and uncalloused, his smile practiced and empty as a politician's promise. Mr. Cole. Hale's voice was smooth as oil on water. I was wondering when you'd pay me a visit. Ethan stopped. You know who I am? Of course. I make it my business to know everyone in this town, particularly those who might prove interesting. Hale gestured to a chair. Please sit. Can I offer you a drink? I'll stand. Ethan kept his hands loose at his sides. And I'm not here to socialize. No, I imagine you're here about young Ben Fletcher. Hale leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. Touching, really, the disgraced rancher developing a conscience. Though I must say your timing's unfortunate. The auction's tomorrow, contracts are already prepared, and I have 3 serious bidders ready to close the deal. There's not going to be an auction. Hale's smile widened. Oh? And how precisely do you intend to prevent it? By paying the debt. The words came out before Ethan had fully thought them through. Whatever Ben's family owed, I'll pay it. Really? Hale pulled a ledger from a drawer, made a show of consulting it. Let's see. Medical expenses, funeral costs, 6 months back rent on county housing, administrative fees. He looked up. Comes to $412. The number hit Ethan like a fist. $400. He'd be lucky to scrape together $4 between now and tomorrow. Hale watched him with the patient interest of a cat watching a mouse realize it's trapped. I thought not. You see, Mr. Cole, this is the beauty of the territorial system. Everything's legal. Everything's fair. The boy's family incurred legitimate debts. Those debts must be paid. If they cannot pay in currency, they pay in labor. It's all very civilized. It's slavery. It's contract law. There's a difference, both legally and morally. Hale closed the ledger. Now, I appreciate your sentiment, truly. It speaks well of your character, what's left of it. But unless you can produce $412 by noon tomorrow, this conversation is pointless. Ethan's mind raced. $400. There was no legitimate way to get that kind of money in less than a day. No job he could work, no loan he could secure, no favor he could call in. But there were other ways, dangerous ways. If I get the money, he said slowly, you'll release the boy, tear up the contract? If you present me with $412 before the auction begins, yes. I'm a businessman, Mr. Cole. I don't care where the money comes from. The debt's the same either way. Hale's smile turned sharp. Of course, I'm curious to see how a man who sleeps in a shack and works day labor plans to acquire such a sum. But surprises are what make life interesting. Ethan turned toward the door. Oh, Mr. Cole. Hale's voice stopped him. A word of friendly advice. There are men in this town who would be very displeased if you attempted to interfere with legitimate business. Men who resolve their displeasure in rather permanent ways. I'd hate to see you come to harm over misplaced heroism. Thanks for the warning. Ethan didn't look back. I'll keep it in mind. He descended the stairs with his heart hammering and his thoughts spinning. $412. Impossible. Except it had to be possible because he'd given his word, and a man's word was all he had left when everything else was gone. The sun was lower now, painting the buildings gold and throwing long shadows across the dusty street. Ethan walked without destination, trying to think, trying to plan. There was one option. One place in Carson Flats where a man could get money fast if he was desperate enough and stupid enough not to care about the cost. The gambling hall sat 2 blocks off Main Street, a ramshackle building that somehow stayed standing through sheer force of vice and bad decisions. Ethan had been there exactly once, 3 years ago, in the dark weeks after losing his land. He'd lost $20 he couldn't afford and sworn he'd never go back. He went back. The interior was thick with smoke and the smell of cheap whiskey. Men crowded around tables, faces intent on cards and dice, and the slim chance of winning enough to change their luck. Most of them would walk out with less than they came in with. A few would win. Those were the ones the hall counted on, the winners who'd come back tomorrow, convinced their luck was turning. Ethan had exactly $6.30 to his name. He'd need to turn it into $400 by morning. The odds were astronomical. The smart money said he'd lose everything in the first hour, but smart money didn't make promises to scared kids in iron cages. He found a poker table with an empty chair, sat down, and pushed his money forward. Deal me in. The other players looked him over. A middle-aged man in worn clothes with desperate eyes. Easy mark. Fresh blood. They smiled and welcomed him to the table. 2 hours later, Ethan was down to $3. His hands were shaking, sweat stuck his shirt to his back despite the evening cool creeping through the walls. He'd lost on bad beats and worse luck, watching his meager stake dwindle with each hand. The other players had stopped smiling. Now they just looked bored, ready for him to lose the rest and clear the chair for someone with actual money. He couldn't quit, couldn't walk away. Not with Ben waiting in that cell, counting on a promise Ethan was failing to keep with every card turned over. Last hand, the dealer said, not unkindly. You got enough for the ante? Ethan pushed his remaining money forward. The cards came. He picked them up with fingers that wanted to tremble, forced himself to look at them calmly. A pair of 8s, not good, not terrible. He'd need help from the community cards. The betting went around. He called, putting his last dollar into the pot. The flop came down. 8 of diamonds, king of clubs, 2 of hearts, 3 of a kind. His heart jumped, then steadied. Still had to survive 2 more cards and whatever the other players were holding. More betting. He had nothing left to bet with. He was all in, committed, watching as the pot grew beyond anything he could have imagined an hour ago. The turn card. 4 of spades. The river. 8 of clubs. 4 of a kind. The betting finished. Cards turned over. A straight, 2 pair. 3 kings. None of them could beat quad 8s. Ethan stared at the pot being pushed toward him. $43. Combined with what he'd started with, he had $49.30. Not enough. Not even close. But it was a start. He played through the night, riding the strange momentum of that impossible hand. He won some, lost some, slowly grinding his stack higher. Other players came and went. The smoke got thicker. The whiskey got cheaper. The hours blurred together. Somewhere near dawn, he pushed away from the table with $217. Still not enough. His eyes burned. His back ached from hours in the hard chair. He needed sleep, food, time to think. He had none of those things. The sky was purling toward gray when he stepped outside. The town was quiet, caught in that pause between night's end and morning's beginning. He walked toward his shack, mind still racing. $217. He needed almost twice that. The auction was at noon, less than 7 hours away. There was only one option left. The option he'd been avoiding because it meant crossing a line he'd never crossed, becoming something he'd sworn he'd never be. He could rob someone. Hail, specifically. The man clearly had cash on hand, probably kept a safe in that fancy office. Ethan could break in, take what he needed, use Hale's own money to buy Ben's freedom. It was theft, crime, the kind of thing that could get him hanged if he was caught, but it was also justice in a way the law would never provide. He was still debating with himself when he reached his shack and found someone waiting. A man stepped out of the shadows, tall and lean, wearing a duster despite the summer heat and a gun belt slung low on his hips. His face was hard, weathered, familiar in a way that made Ethan's breath catch. Marcus? Marcus Drew had been his neighbor once, back when Ethan had land. They'd helped each other through hard seasons, shared whiskey on cold nights, trusted each other with the kind of casual certainty you only get from working shoulder to shoulder. Then Ethan lost everything, and Marcus had his own problems to worry about. They hadn't spoken in 2 years. "Heard you were asking about Rourke Hale," Marcus said. His voice was the same as Ethan remembered, quiet, steady, with an undercurrent of something that might have been amusement or might have been danger. "Heard you made a promise to an orphan boy." News travels fast. In a town this size, always does. Marcus studied him. "You planning something stupid?" "Probably." "Good." Marcus reached into his duster, pulled out a leather pouch, and tossed it to Ethan. Ethan caught it reflexively. The weight was substantial, the clink of coins unmistakable. He opened it, stared at the gold and silver inside. "That's $300, Marcus said. "Had it saved for a land purchase, but turns out the deed was falsified. Hale's work, naturally." His smile was cold. "Figure it's better used buying a kid's freedom than sitting in my saddlebag." Ethan couldn't speak. The pouch felt heavy as salvation in his hands. "You got the rest?" Marcus asked. "Most of it, about 200. So you're short. By how much?" Ethan did the math in his head. "Around $100? Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he pulled out a silver pocket watch, old and scratched, but clearly valuable. "This was my father's. Should be worth 70, 80 if you can find the right buyer. That plus what you got should put you over the top." "Marcus, I can't." "You can, and you will." Marcus pressed the watch into Ethan's hand. "I didn't do anything when Hale destroyed your ranch. Didn't speak up when the bank took your land. Told myself it wasn't my business, wasn't my fight." His jaw tightened. "Been living with that for 2 years. So you're going to take this money and that watch, and you're going to keep that promise you made, and maybe that'll balance the scales a little bit." Ethan's throat closed up. "I don't know what to say." "Don't say nothing, just win." Marcus stepped back into the shadows. "And Ethan, watch yourself. Hale don't like losing. He's got men who'll come for you when this is done. Let them come." "That's what I figured you'd say." Marcus's voice held something that might have been approval. "Good luck." He was gone, melting into the pre-dawn darkness like he'd never been there at all. Ethan stood alone, holding a pouch of coins and a silver watch, feeling something crack open in his chest, something that had been frozen since his wife died, since his land was taken, since he'd learned that the world was exactly as cruel as everyone said. Hope. That's what it was. Dangerous, fragile, impossible hope. He went inside, counted his money twice to be sure. With Marcus's contribution and the watch, he had enough. Barely, but enough. The sun was rising, painting the sky red and gold. Ethan didn't sleep. He washed his face in cold water, changed into his least worn shirt, and tucked the money carefully into an inside pocket. Then he sat on the edge of his narrow cot and waited for noon. The hours crawled. He thought about Ben, about the boy's desperate face pressed against those bars. Thought about all the other children Hale had sold, scattered to ranches and mines and worse. Thought about his wife, who'd believed he was a good man, who trusted him to do the right thing even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. At 11:30, he walked to the land registry building. The auction was being held in the town square, a dusty patch of dirt between the courthouse and the general store. A small platform had been erected, rough pine boards hammered together to make a stage. Already a crowd was gathering, ranchers looking for cheap labor, businessmen seeking opportunity, curious townspeople drawn by the spectacle. Ben stood on the platform, wrists bound, eyes hollow. He looked smaller than he had yesterday, more fragile, like hope had finally bled out of him during the long night. Then he saw Ethan. Something flickered in his face. Not quite hope. Too dangerous to hope. But recognition, at least. Remembrance of a promise. Ethan pushed through the crowd toward the platform where Hale stood with a ledger and a practiced smile. "Mr. Cole." Hale's eyebrows rose. "I confess I didn't expect to see you here. Come to watch the sale?" "Come to stop it." Ethan pulled the money from his pocket, counted out bills and coins, feeling the weight of every dollar. Marcus's coins, his own winnings, the silver watch. $412, exact. The crowd went silent. Hale stared at the money, then at Ethan, and something dangerous moved behind his eyes. "Where did you get this?" "Does it matter? You said you didn't care where the money came from." Ethan kept his voice level. "We had a deal. I pay the debt, you release the boy." Hale's smile had vanished. "I said if you presented the money before the auction began. It's now noon. The auction has begun. You haven't called for bids yet. A technicality. One you're trying to hide behind because you never expected me to come up with the money." Ethan raised his voice, making sure the crowd could hear. "I'm offering payment in full for Ben Fletcher's debt. Public witness to the offer. Either you accept it and honor your word, or you admit in front of everyone here that your contracts aren't worth the paper they're written on." Silence. The crowd shifted, murmuring. Hale's face had gone red. "You think you're clever," Hale said softly. "You think you've won. I think I'm keeping a promise. Are you keeping yours?" For a long moment, Hale didn't move. Then, slowly he reached out and took the money, counted it with fingers that shook slightly, not from fear but from rage barely held in check. "The debt is paid," he said, each word clipped and precise. "The contract is void." "Release him." Hale jerked his head at one of his men, who reluctantly climbed onto the platform and cut Ben's bonds. The boy stood frozen for a moment, as if he couldn't quite believe what was happening. Then he ran, off the platform, through the crowd, straight to Ethan. Ethan caught him, felt small arms wrap around his waist, felt the boy shaking with relief and leftover terror, and something that might have been the first real safety he'd known in months. "You came," Ben whispered. "You really came." "Told you I would." Ethan's voice was rough. He looked up, met Hale's eyes across the distance. The businessman's expression promised retribution. Promised that this wasn't over, that winning one battle meant nothing when the war was far from done. But right now, in this moment, with morning sun warming his shoulders and a freed boy clinging to him like a lifeline, Ethan didn't care about tomorrow's threats. He'd kept his promise. That was enough. The crowd dispersed slowly, conversations rippling through the square like wind through wheat. Ethan could feel their eyes on him, some curious, some approving, most just uncertain about what they'd witnessed. A man challenging Rourke Hale didn't happen often in Carson Flats. A man winning against him happened even less. Ben still gripped Ethan's hand, fingers locked tight as if letting go might dissolve the reality of his freedom. The boy's legs trembled slightly, exhaustion and relief warring in his small frame. He needed food, rest, somewhere safe to process what had just happened. Ethan needed all those things too, but safety was a luxury he couldn't afford yet, not with Hale's eyes still burning into his back. "Come on," he said quietly to Ben. "Let's get you out of here." They made it 3 steps before a voice cut through the dispersing crowd. "Mr. Cole? A word, if you please." Ethan turned. A man stood near the platform, mid-50s, wearing a marshal's badge and an expression that gave nothing away. Marshal Tom Brennan had been the law in Carson Flats for 8 years, long enough to know which way the wind blew and who controlled the weather. He was a competent lawman who'd learned that keeping the peace sometimes meant looking the other way when power flexed its muscles. "Marshal." Ethan kept his voice neutral. Brennan's gaze shifted to Ben, then back to Ethan. "That was an interesting display. Public challenge to a legal contract sale." "Wasn't a challenge, was a payment. Hale got his money, the debt's cleared. Nothing illegal about it." "No, I suppose not." Brennan scratched his jaw. "Still, it's caused quite a stir. Mr. Hale's not pleased." "Mr. Hale got exactly what he asked for. If he's displeased, that's between him and his expectations. Something that might have been amusement flickered across Brennan's face, gone too quick to be certain. Fair enough. Just wanted to make sure we're all clear on the facts. The boy's debt is paid, the contract's void, and he's free to go. That about sum it up? That sums it up. And you've taken responsibility for him? He's under your care now? Ethan hadn't thought that far ahead, hadn't planned beyond freeing Ben from the auction block, but looking down at the boy's upturned face, seeing the desperate hope there, the answer came easier than it should have. Yes, he's under my care. Brennan nodded slowly. Then I suggest you get him off the street. Let things settle down some. People need time to digest what happened here today. It was good advice wrapped in a warning. Ethan recognized both. Appreciate the counsel, Marshal. Just doing my job. Brennan tipped his hat. You take care now, Mr. Cole. Both of you. He walked away, and Ethan wondered if that brief conversation had been an act of kindness or a CYA maneuver to establish plausible distance from whatever came next. Probably both. The walk back to Ethan's shack felt longer than it should have. Ben kept pace silently, his hand still locked in Ethan's, his eyes darting to every shadow and alley. The boy was expecting something bad, waiting for the other boot to drop, for this impossible reprieve to be snatched away. Ethan understood. He was waiting for it too. The shack looked even more pathetic with Ben beside him, weathered boards, a roof that sagged in the middle, a door that hung crooked on leather hinges. It was barely adequate for one man who'd given up on comfort. For a boy who needed stability, safety, something resembling a home, it was woefully insufficient. It's not much, Ethan said, pushing the door open. But it's dry, mostly, and it's ours for now. Ben stepped inside, taking in the single room with its narrow cot, wooden crate that served as a table, rusted stove, and not much else. It's better than the cell, he said quietly, and nobody's going to sell me out of it. The simple gratitude in those words hit harder than any accusation could have. You hungry? Ethan asked. Yes, sir. Don't call me sir, just Ethan. He rummaged through his meager supplies, beans, some hardtack, coffee that was more grounds than bean. I can make us some beans and cornbread. It's not fancy. I haven't had cornbread in 8 months. Ben's voice cracked slightly. Cornbread sounds perfect. They ate in silence, Ben wolfing down his portion like he expected it to vanish. Ethan watched him, seeing the sharp angles of near starvation beneath the dirt and bruises. How long had Hale kept him in that cell on minimal rations? How long had the boy been surviving on hope and fear? When's the last time you had a real meal? Ethan asked. Ben thought about it, chewing slowly. Christmas. The church did a charity dinner. Ma was still alive then, barely. She couldn't eat nothing, but she made sure I got a plate, turkey and potatoes and pie. His eyes went distant. That was before Mr. Hale bought our debt, before the county took me. 4 months. The boy had been hungry for 4 months. Ethan's jaw tightened. We'll get you fed proper. Build some strength back. Why are you doing this? The question came sudden and raw. You don't know me. Don't owe me nothing. You gave up all your money. That watch looked real valuable, and you made Mr. Hale angry, which everyone says is a dangerous thing to do. So why? Ethan set down his tin plate. Outside, the afternoon heat was building, turning the shack into an oven. Somewhere a dog barked, and wagon wheels creaked past on the street. You ever make a promise you knew you couldn't keep? He asked, but made it anyway because not making it would be worse than failing? Ben nodded slowly. That's what yesterday was. Standing at those bars, hearing you ask for help. I knew I had no way to save you, no money, no power, no plan. But walking away would have meant admitting that the world's exactly as cruel as it seems, that good people can't do nothing about bad situations, that a scared kid's just going to have to accept being sold like livestock. Ethan met his eyes. I couldn't accept that. Still can't. But you did save me. You found a way. With help. A friend gave me money, I got lucky at cards, and somehow it was enough. He paused. But here's the thing, Ben. The hard part isn't over. We won one fight. That doesn't mean the war's done. As if summoned by the words, a knock rattled the door. Ethan's hand dropped instinctively to his belt, where a knife rode in a leather sheath. Ben went rigid, fear flooding back into his face. "Stay behind me," Ethan murmured, moving to the door. He opened it to find Sullivan from the brass bell, looking grim and road-dusty. "We need to talk," Sullivan said, "and you need to hear this quick." Ethan stepped outside, pulling the door mostly closed. "What's wrong?" "Hale's making moves. Soon as the auction ended, he sent riders out. 3 of them, heading different directions." Sullivan kept his voice low. "Word is he's calling in favors, putting out feelers. He wants you gone, Ethan, one way or another." "I figured as much. Man like that doesn't take public embarrassment well. It's worse than embarrassment. You exposed a crack in his system, showed that his contracts can be challenged, that someone willing to stand up can win against him." Sullivan glanced past Ethan toward the shack. "He can't let that stand. If one person successfully defies him, others might try. His whole operation depends on fear and the appearance of inevitability." "So what's he planning?" "Don't know specifics, but I'd bet my bar those riders went to fetch some hard men. The kind who solve problems permanent-like." Sullivan's expression darkened. "You got maybe a day, probably less. After that, you'll have professionals coming for you." Ethan absorbed this, feeling the weight of it settle over his shoulders. "And the marshal?" "Brennan's a decent man, but he's practical. If Hale's men come for you outside town limits, or make it look like an accident, or just plain kill you and hide the body, Brennan won't ask too many questions. Can't, really, without proof." Sullivan shook his head. "You backed a bear into a corner, friend. Now it's going to come out swinging." "Then I better be ready when it does." "Or you could run. Take the boy. Head north into Wyoming territory. Start over somewhere. Hale's name doesn't mean anything." "Run where? With what money?" "I spent everything I had saving Ben. We'd be on foot, broke, trying to outrun men on horses with rifles and a grudge." Ethan looked back toward the shack. "Besides, running just means the next town deals with Hale's cruelty. The next kids get sold. Nothing changes." "Noble sentiment. Won't help much when you're dead." "Maybe not. But I'm tired of running, Sullivan. Tired of backing down. I lost my land, my wife, my name. All I got left is the choice to stand or fold." He met Sullivan's eyes. "I'm standing." Sullivan was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed. "Figured you'd say something like that, which is why I brought you this." He reached under his coat and pulled out a revolver, old but well-maintained, along with a box of ammunition. "It was my father's. Shoot straight if you know how to handle it." Ethan took the gun, feeling the weight of it, not just the physical heft, but the responsibility, the acknowledgement that what came next might require violence. He'd never killed a man, never wanted to, but wanting didn't change what was necessary. "I don't know what to say," he began. "Then don't say nothing. Just live long enough to prove I was right about you." Sullivan turned to go, then paused. "One more thing. Marcus Drew came by the bar asking questions. Wanted to know if Hale had made any moves yet, if you were still breathing. I think he's keeping an eye on things." "Marcus already gave me everything he had. Some debts ain't paid with money. Man feels like he owes you or feels guilty for not helping sooner. He'll find ways to balance the scales." Sullivan nodded toward the shack. "Watch that boy, and watch your back." He left, disappearing into the afternoon heat shimmer like a ghost. Ethan stood in the doorway, turning the revolver over in his hands. The metal was warm from Sullivan's body heat, the grip worn smooth from years of use. He checked the cylinder, empty, which was smart for transport, then loaded 6 rounds with hands that had forgotten how to shake. When he went back inside, Ben was standing exactly where Ethan had left him, eyes fixed on the gun. "Are they coming for us?" the boy asked. "No point in lying." "Probably. Hale doesn't like losing, and he's got resources to do something about it. We should run." "Run where, Ben? You know this territory. Where could we go that they couldn't follow?" The boy's shoulders slumped. "Nowhere. He finds everyone eventually." "Then we don't run. We prepare." Ethan set the revolver on the wooden crate, along with the ammunition. "You ever handle a gun?" "Pa taught me to shoot. Before he died." Ben's voice was small. "Rabbits, mostly. For food." "Good. That's a start." Ethan crouched down to Ben's level. "Listen to me. What's coming might get ugly. Might get dangerous. If it does, I need you to follow instructions exactly. No questions, no hesitation. Can you do that? I can try. Not good enough. Can you do it? Ben's jaw set, and for the first time since Ethan met him, the boy looked less like a victim and more like a survivor. Yes, I can do it. Good. Ethan straightened. First thing, we need supplies. Food, water, medical kit if I can afford one. Then we need to fortify this place best we can. Make it hard for anyone to come through that door uninvited. I can help. I'm good with my hands. Pa said so. They spent the afternoon preparing. Ethan used his last few coins to buy beans, bacon, coffee, and a jug of water from the general store. The clerk gave him odd looks but took his money without comment. News of the auction had spread, and people were still deciding how to react. Back at the shack, Ben proved his worth. The boy found discarded boards in an alley, nails scavenged from a construction site, and together they reinforced the door with crossbeams that could be barred from inside. It wouldn't stop a determined assault, but it would slow one down by precious seconds. As the sun dropped toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, Ethan taught Ben the basics of the revolver: how to hold it, how to aim, how to breathe and squeeze rather than jerk the trigger. You only use this if you absolutely have to, Ethan emphasized. If someone's coming through that door and I can't stop them, otherwise you stay down and stay quiet. Understand? I understand. Ben held the unloaded gun carefully, treating it with the respect it deserved. But I'm not going to hide if you're in trouble. I'm not going to let someone hurt you because you saved me. Ben? No. The boy's eyes were fierce. You stood up for me when nobody else would. You gave up everything to keep me from being sold. I ain't going to repay that by being a coward. Ethan recognized that stubbornness. He'd seen it in his wife when she insisted on staying with him through the drought, refusing to go back to her sister's house where she'd be safe and fed. He'd felt it himself yesterday when he made an impossible promise. Bravery and stupidity look real similar sometimes, he said quietly. Trick is knowing which one you're choosing. Then I guess we're both stupid. Ben offered a small, sad smile. But at least we're stupid together. Despite everything, Ethan almost laughed. They ate as the light failed, beans and bacon cooked over the small stove, coffee that was more wishful thinking than actual beverage. Ben talked a little about his parents, his father who'd worked construction until a fall broke his back, his mother who'd taken in laundry and sewing until the coughing sickness took her strength. Simple people who'd worked hard and died anyway, leaving debts and a child the system decided was collateral. They were good, Ben said, staring into his tin cup. Better than most. They didn't deserve what happened. Good people rarely get what they deserve, Ethan said. Bad ones neither, for that matter. The world's not fair, Ben. Best we can do is try to make our little corner of it a bit more just. Is that what we're doing? Making things more just? Trying to. Don't know if we'll succeed, but trying's worth something. But night fell completely, bringing cooler air and the sound of Carson Flats settling into evening routine. Dogs barked. A piano played badly somewhere down the street. Laughter drifted from the saloons. Normal sounds of normal life, while Ethan sat in a shack with a borrowed gun and a freed child, waiting for violence that might come tonight or tomorrow or never. Except it would come. Men like Hale didn't forgive public humiliation. You should sleep, Ethan told Ben, gesturing to the cot. I'll keep watch. What about you? I'll rest later. Right now, someone needs to stay alert. Ben looked like he wanted to argue, but exhaustion won. He curled up on the cot, small and vulnerable, and within minutes his breathing had evened into sleep. Ethan sat by the door, revolver in his lap, listening to the night. His eyes burned from too many hours awake. His body ached from tension, but sleep felt impossible. Every creak of wood, every footstep on the street outside, every gust of wind against the walls sent his hand to the gun. Hours passed. The moon rose, painting silver bars through the gaps in the walls. The town grew quieter as midnight approached and passed, leaving only the sounds of wind and distance. He must have dozed despite himself because he jerked awake to the sound of voices outside. Low voices. Multiple men, speaking in tones meant not to carry. Ethan's hand closed on the revolver. He stood silently, moving to the window, really just a gap covered by oilcloth, and peered through a crack in the boards. 3 men stood in the street, silhouetted by moonlight. They wore dusters despite the warm night, the kind of long coats men wore when they wanted to hide weapons. One gestured toward the shack. Another shook his head, pointing back toward town. They were debating something, probably whether to move now or wait. Ethan's heart hammered. He glanced at Ben, still sleeping on the cot, then back at the men outside. The decision was made for him when one of the men started walking toward the shack. "Ben!" Ethan kept his voice low but urgent. "Wake up. Quiet, now." The boy came awake instantly, fear sharp in his eyes. He'd learned to wake alert, Ethan realized. Learned it in that cell, never knowing when danger might come. "What's happening?" "Company. 3 men outside. Get behind the crate and stay down." Ben scrambled to obey, crouching behind their makeshift table with his back against the wall. Ethan moved to the door, listening to footsteps approaching on hard-packed dirt. The steps stopped just outside. A pause. Then knuckles rapped against wood. "Mr. Cole, we know you're in there. We just want to talk." The voice was reasonable, almost friendly. Ethan didn't trust it for a second. "Then talk from there. Door stays closed." A low chuckle. "Cautious man. That's smart. Mr. Hale respects caution." A pause. "He also respects business, and this afternoon's business left some loose ends. He'd like to discuss them with you. Tell Hale if he wants to discuss business, he can find me at the Brass Bell tomorrow afternoon, in public." "I don't think you understand. This is a courtesy call, Mr. Cole, a chance to resolve things peaceable-like before they get complicated. Seems to me sending 3 armed men to someone's door in the middle of the night is already complicated." Another pause, longer this time. When the voice came back, the friendliness had evaporated. "You made a mistake today, embarrassed an important man. That's bad for your health, Mr. Cole. Bad for the boy's health, too." Ethan felt rage spike through his fear. "You threaten that child again, and this conversation ends different than you're planning. Big words for a man with nothing. You got 1 gun, maybe 2. We got 3 men, multiple weapons, and no particular hurry. You really want to play this out?" Before Ethan could respond, a new voice cut through the night. 4 men! You forgot to count me." Marcus Drew stepped out of the shadows across the street, rifle held casual but ready. Even in the moonlight, Ethan could see the cold smile on his face. "This is a private discussion," one of the men said, turning toward Marcus. "Funny, sounded more like a threat to me. And I take real personal offense to threats against my friends." Marcus's rifle didn't waver. "Now you boys got a choice. You can walk away peaceable, go tell Hale that his intimidation tactics need work, or you can try something stupid, and we'll see how fast you can draw against a man who's already got you covered." The 3 men looked at each other. The standoff hung in the balance, teetering between violence and retreat. "This ain't over," the spokesman finally said. "Never thought it was," Marcus replied, "but it's over for tonight." The men backed away, hands carefully visible, and melted into the darkness. Their footsteps faded, heading back toward the nicer part of town where Hale probably waited for news of a successful intimidation. Marcus waited until they were gone, then crossed to the shack. "You can breathe now." Ethan opened the door, legs suddenly weak. "How'd you know they'd come tonight?" "Didn't know for sure, but I've been watching Hale's place since this afternoon. Saw him talking to some rough-looking fellas. Saw money change hands. Figured they'd move quick." Marcus glanced inside, spotted Ben peeking over the crate. "Boy all right?" "I'm fine," Ben said, standing up. His voice shook only slightly. "Thank you for helping us." "Don't thank me yet. All I did was buy you time." Marcus looked back at Ethan. "They'll be back, and next time they won't announce themselves. They'll just come shooting." "No." "But, so what's your play? You can't sit in this shack forever, and you can't outgun Hale's resources." Ethan had been thinking about this all evening. There was only one move that made sense, only one way to end this that didn't involve running or dying. "I need to go after the root of the problem," he said slowly. "Hale's power comes from those contracts, from the appearance of legality. If I can prove the contracts are fraudulent, that he's been falsifying debts and forging signatures, the whole system collapses." "That's a big if." And even bigger proof. Ben said Hale has documents, signed papers, ledgers. If I could get into his office, you're talking about breaking and entering, theft. Maybe worse if you're caught. I'm talking about finding evidence of crimes Hale's already committed, exposing them. Ethan met Marcus's eyes. I didn't come this far to hide in a shack waiting for hired guns. I'm ending this one way or another. Marcus studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly, a decision made. All right, but you're not doing it alone. Hale's got guards, locks, probably a safe. You'll need help. He glanced at Ben. And someone to watch the boy while we're gone. I'm coming with you, Ben said immediately. No. Ethan's tone left no room for argument. You stay here, bar the door. Don't open it for anyone but me or Marcus. This is the dangerous part, Ben. The part where I need you safe. But no arguments. I didn't free you from Hale just to get you killed helping me rob him. Ethan softened his voice. I need you here. Need to know you're safe so I can focus on what needs doing. Can you give me that? Ben's jaw worked, but finally he nodded. Okay. But you come back, both of you. That's the plan. Marcus checked his rifle, then looked at Ethan. When do you want to move? Tomorrow night. Gives us time to scout the building, plan an approach, figure out what we're walking into. And if it goes wrong? Ethan touched the revolver at his belt. Then I guess we find out how good I am at things I swore I'd never do. The two men stood in the doorway, looking out at the sleeping town. Somewhere out there, Hale was planning his next move. Somewhere, hired killers were sharpening knives and checking ammunition. Somewhere, the machinery of corruption and cruelty was grinding forward, indifferent to individual suffering. But here, in a shabby shack at the edge of nowhere, 3 people who'd been discarded by the system were choosing to fight back. It might be stupid, it might be suicide, but at least they were choosing it together. The next day crawled by with the excruciating slowness of waiting for something terrible. Ethan spent the morning hours watching the land registry building from different vantage points, memorizing the rhythm of activity. Clerks arrived at 8, left for lunch at noon, departed at 5. Hale himself came and went on no particular schedule, sometimes staying late into the evening, sometimes leaving before lunch. A guard stood outside the front entrance during business hours, a heavy-set man with a shotgun who looked bored but competent. Marcus joined him around midday, bringing bread and cheese wrapped in cloth. They ate in the alley behind the general store, speaking in low voices while keeping the registry building in view. There's a back entrance, Marcus said, gesturing with a piece of bread. Delivery door leads to a storage room on the ground floor. Stairs to the second floor are internal, but if we can get through that door, we've got access. Locks? One I can see. Probably another inside. But locks can be dealt with if you know what you're doing. Marcus glanced at Ethan. You know what you're doing? Not even a little bit. Ethan took a bite of cheese, barely tasting it. But I'm a fast learner when motivated. They watched the building for another hour, noting patterns. The guard changed at 2 in the afternoon, the new man younger but equally armed. No one used the back entrance while they watched, though delivery wagons had left ruts in the dirt suggesting regular traffic. Tonight then, Marcus said finally, after midnight when the town's asleep, we go in quiet, find what we're looking for, get out before anyone knows we were there. And if Hale's still in his office, then we improvise. Marcus's smile had no humor in it. I've gotten good at improvising these past few years. They separated to avoid suspicion, Marcus heading back to his place to gather supplies while Ethan returned to the shack. Ben was waiting anxiously, having spent the day as instructed, door barred, shutters closed, making no noise that might draw attention. Did you find a way in? The boy asked as soon as Ethan entered. We found a possibility. Whether it works remains to be seen. Ethan set the remaining bread and cheese on the crate. You eat today? Some. Wasn't very hungry. Ben looked pale, shadows under his eyes suggesting he'd slept as poorly as Ethan. I keep thinking about what happens if you get caught. If Mr. Hale catches you in his office, he won't just send you away. I know what he'll do. Ethan sat down heavily on the floor, back against the wall. Every muscle ached from tension and too little sleep. But staying here waiting for his men to come back isn't an option either. We need leverage, Ben. Need proof of what he's done so we can take it to someone with authority, a federal marshal maybe, or a territorial judge, someone outside his sphere of influence. What if there's no one outside his influence? What if it goes all the way up? It was a fair question, and one Ethan had been avoiding thinking about too carefully. Corruption rarely stopped at town limits. Men like Hale had connections, bought favors, cultivated relationships with people in power. Exposing him might just mean painting a target on their backs that followed them across territories. But the alternative was accepting that evil won, that children could be sold and good people ground down and nothing would ever change. Ethan had lived with that acceptance for 3 years, watching his life crumble while telling himself there was nothing he could do. He was done accepting. "Then we deal with that when we come to it," he said. "One fight at a time, Ben. That's all we can manage." The afternoon bled into evening. Ethan tried to rest, but sleep wouldn't come, his mind spinning through scenarios and possibilities. Around sunset, Sullivan arrived with more supplies: rope, a dark lantern that could be shuttered to hide the light, a small pry bar. "Don't ask where I got these," Sullivan said, setting them inside the door. "And if anyone does ask, I'll swear on my mother's grave I never saw you." "Understood." Ethan examined the tools. "You didn't have to do this." "Yeah, I did. Been watching Hale destroy this town piece by piece for 5 years. Someone needs to stop him, and you're the first person crazy enough to try." Sullivan's expression was grim. "Just make it count. If you're going to risk your neck, make damn sure it's worth it." After Sullivan left, Ethan showed Ben how to use the pry bar as a weapon if necessary, how to jam it under the door to reinforce the barricade, how to break a window for escape if things went truly sideways. The boy absorbed it all with the focused intensity of someone who understood the stakes. "You're coming back," Ben said. It wasn't quite a question, more like a statement he needed to be true. "I'm coming back," Ethan promised, hoping it wasn't a lie. Midnight arrived with a sliver moon and scattered clouds that would help hide movement, but made the darkness nearly absolute. Ethan met Marcus behind the livery stable, both dressed in dark clothes, faces shadowed by hat brims. Marcus carried his rifle and a leather satchel. Ethan had the revolver, the pry bar, and the shuttered lantern. "Last chance to reconsider," Marcus said quietly. "Not reconsidering." Ethan's voice was steady despite the fear curling in his gut. "Let's go." They moved through the sleeping town like ghosts, keeping to alleys and shadows, avoiding the main streets where late-night drunks and insomniacs might spot them. Carson Flats was never truly silent. Dogs barked in the distance. Wind rattled loose shutters. Somewhere a baby cried. But the town had settled into the deep stillness of small hours when most sensible people were asleep. The land registry building loomed dark against the star-scattered sky. No lights showed in the windows, no movement visible. The front guard was gone, his post abandoned until morning. Hale apparently didn't think anyone would be foolish enough to break in. He was about to be proven wrong. They approached the back entrance carefully, watching for any sign of activity. Nothing moved. Marcus knelt by the door examining the lock in the faint moonlight. "Standard tumbler," he murmured. "Give me a minute." He produced a set of picks from his satchel, thin metal tools that glinted dully. Ethan kept watch while Marcus worked, listening for footsteps or voices or any indication they'd been spotted. The night remained quiet except for Marcus's quiet breathing and the tiny scraping sounds of metal on metal. The lock clicked open. Marcus eased the door inward, hinges protesting with a soft squeal that sounded loud as a scream in the silence. They both froze, waiting for shouts or running feet. Nothing happened. They slipped inside, pulling the door closed behind them. Ethan uncovered the lantern just enough to throw a small circle of light. They were in a storage room as Marcus had predicted. Shelves lined with ledgers and boxes of documents, filing cabinets against one wall. A door on the far side presumably led to the main floor. "Upstairs," Ethan whispered. "Hale's office." They found the stairs and climbed carefully, testing each step before putting full weight on it. The building was old and the wood creaked treacherously. Every sound felt amplified, certain to bring discovery. But they reached the second-floor hallway without incident. 3 doors lined the corridor. One stood open, revealing a clerk's workspace with a desk and typewriter. The second was locked, but looked like another storage area. The third, at the end of the hall, had a brass nameplate, Rourke Hale, proprietor. Ethan tried the handle, locked as expected. Marcus made quick work of it, his picks dancing through the mechanism with practiced ease. "Spent some time learning this after I lost my land," he said quietly. "Figured if the system was going to rob me blind, I should at least understand how locks work." The door swung open. Hale's office looked different at night. The polished desk gleamed dully in the lantern light. Filing cabinets lined one wall. A safe sat in the corner, iron-banded and formidable. The curtains were drawn, blocking any light from escaping to the street. "Start with the desk," Marcus suggested. "Safe will take time we might not have." Ethan set the lantern on the desk and started opening drawers. The first held office supplies, pens, ink, blotting paper. The second contained correspondence, business letters discussing land purchases and loan terms. Nothing obviously incriminating, but worth examining more closely later. The third drawer was locked. "Marcus." The lock yielded quickly. Inside, Ethan found a leather-bound ledger and a stack of contracts bound with string. He opened the ledger, angling it toward the lantern light. Columns of names and numbers filled the pages in neat script. He recognized some of the names: families who'd lost land, businesses that had shuttered, people who'd disappeared from town over the past few years. "Look at this," he said quietly, tracing a finger down the page. "Ben Fletcher, debt listed as $412. But here in the margin, there's another number, $87. And this note: original debt paid in full, county contract purchased for $87, resold for $412, profit $325. Marcus leaned over his shoulder. He's been buying debts for pennies and claiming they're worth hundreds, then selling the debtors as contract labor for whatever he can get. It's fraud, pure and simple. Ethan flipped through more pages, finding similar patterns repeated dozens of times. Children, widows, injured men, anyone vulnerable was fair game. Hale would acquire their small debts, inflate the amounts through false accounting, then sell them to the highest bidder. This is enough to bring him down. Federal courts don't take kindly to debt manipulation and false imprisonment. Assuming we can get it to federal courts, Marcus straightened, listening. "Thought I heard something." They both froze. Ethan shuttered the lantern, plunging the office into darkness. Footsteps echoed from the floor below. Heavy boots on wooden boards. Multiple sets. "Someone's here," Marcus breathed. "We need to move." Ethan grabbed the ledger and the contracts, stuffing them inside his shirt. "Back door." They came in that way. "Listen, the footsteps are coming from the rear of the building. Front entrance, then. Into the street where anyone can see us?" Marcus shook his head. "We'd never make it." The footsteps were climbing the stairs now. Voices accompanied them, low and conferring. "Window," Ethan said suddenly. He crossed to the curtains, pulled them aside. The window overlooked a narrow gap between the registry building and the structure next door, maybe 6 feet of empty air, then another wall with windows of its own. "We can jump across, get into the building next door, and find another way out." "That's insane." "You got a better idea?" The footsteps reached the hallway. A voice called out, "Check the offices. Someone tripped the back door alarm." There was an alarm. Of course there was an alarm. Marcus moved to the window, examined the gap. "If we miss..." "We don't miss." Ethan unlatched the window, pushed it up. Cool night air rushed in. The drop to the alley below was 30 feet of darkness, ending in hard-packed dirt and probably broken bones. The door to Hale's office rattled. Someone was trying the handle. "Go," Marcus hissed. Ethan climbed onto the windowsill, balancing precariously. The gap looked wider from this angle, the opposite window smaller and further. He couldn't think about it, couldn't hesitate. He jumped. For a terrible moment he hung suspended in empty air, the alley yawning below, death a real and immediate possibility. Then his hands hit the opposite windowsill, fingers scrabbling for purchase on painted wood. He caught hold, pulled himself up and through, tumbling into a dark room that smelled of dust and old paper. Behind him, Marcus landed with more grace, rolling through the window and coming up in a crouch. "Office building," he whispered, taking in their surroundings. "Lawyers, probably, or accountants." Behind them, voices shouted from Hale's office. "The window's open! They went across!" "Move," Ethan said. They ran through the dark building, bouncing off invisible furniture, navigating by feel and desperation. Found a staircase. took it down 2 steps at a time, burst through a door into a ground floor hallway. The front entrance was locked from inside, but the bolt yielded easily. They spilled into the street just as lamps flared to life in the registry building's upper windows. Shouts rang out. Men appeared at Hale's window, pointing. Ethan and Marcus ran. They cut through alleys, vaulted fences, ducked behind buildings. Ethan's lungs burned and his heart hammered against the stolen ledger pressed to his chest. Behind them, pursuit crashed through the night. Boots on boardwalks, angry voices calling for someone to stop the thieves. Marcus pulled him into a recessed doorway, both men pressing flat against the wood and trying to control their ragged breathing. Footsteps pounded past their hiding spot, fading into the distance. "We need to split up," Marcus whispered. "They're looking for 2 men together. Separately, we're harder to spot. The evidence, you keep it. Get back to the shack, secure those documents. I'll lead them on a chase, lose them somewhere south of town." Marcus gripped his shoulder. "Don't get caught, Ethan. All this is worthless if Hale gets those papers back." "Where will you go?" "Got a friend with a ranch 15 miles out. I can hide there until things cool down." Marcus checked the street, then looked back. "Get that evidence to someone who can use it. Federal marshal, territorial judge. Hell, send it to a newspaper if you have to. Just make sure the truth gets out." "I will." "Good." Marcus took a breath, then stepped out of their hiding spot and deliberately kicked over a stack of crates, sending them clattering across the boardwalk. "Over here!" he shouted at nothing, then ran south, boots loud on the wooden planks. The pursuing men heard the noise and redirected, chasing after Marcus's voice. Ethan waited until they'd passed, then moved in the opposite direction, heading for the shack through a circuitous route that took him behind the livery stable, through a dried creek bed, and finally to the edge of town where his pathetic shelter waited. Ben had the door barred as instructed. "It's me," Ethan called softly. "Let me in." The bar scraped aside and the door opened. Ben's face was pale, eyes wide. "I heard shouting. Thought they caught you." "Not yet." Ethan slipped inside, barred the door again, then sagged against it while his heart rate slowly returned to normal. The ledger pressed against his ribs, a damning record of years of cruelty and greed. "We got it, Ben. We got proof." He pulled the ledger out, set it on the crate. In the dim light from their single candle, the pages looked ordinary, just numbers and names in neat columns. But those numbers represented lives destroyed, families broken, children sold. Ben stared at the ledger. "That's really it? Proof of what he did?" "It's a start. There's documentation here of debt fraud, contract manipulation, false imprisonment, enough to bring federal charges if we can get it to the right people." Ethan flipped through the pages again, stopping at Ben's entry. "See here? Your real debt was $87. Hale bought it from the county for that amount, then claimed you owed over $400. Pure fraud." "What about the others? All the other names?" "Same pattern, some worse." Ethan's jaw tightened. "There's a girl here, Sarah McKenzie, age 12. Original debt, $32 for her father's burial. Hale claimed she owed $350, sold her to a mining company in Colorado." Ben's hands curled into fists. "We have to stop him, have to make sure he pays for what he's done." "We will. But first we need to survive the night. Hale knows we took these documents. He'll come for them, and he'll come hard." Ethan checked the revolver, made sure it was loaded. "We hole up here until dawn, then we find Marshal Brennan. He might be in Hale's pocket, but even corrupt lawmen have limits. Faced with documented evidence of federal crimes, he'll have to act. And if he doesn't, then we take it over his head. Territory capital, federal marshal, whoever will listen." Ethan met the boy's eyes. "This ends, Ben. One way or another, it ends." They settled in to wait, taking turns keeping watch through gaps in the shutters. The night deepened, the moon setting and leaving only starlight to paint the world in shades of black and gray. Somewhere in the darkness, Marcus was leading pursuers on a wild chase. Somewhere, Hale was discovering the full extent of what had been taken and planning his response. And here, in a shack at the edge of nowhere, a broken man and a freed boy guarded evidence that could bring down an empire of cruelty. Dawn was still hours away when they came. Ethan heard horses first, multiple riders moving at speed through the quiet streets. He moved to the window, peered through the shutters. 6 men on horseback, all armed, led by a figure Ethan recognized even in the darkness. Rourke Hale himself, dressed for riding, his face a mask of cold fury. "Ben, get down," Ethan said quietly. "Behind the crate, flat on the floor. Don't move no matter what happens." The boy obeyed without question, pressing himself into the corner where the crate met the wall. Ethan positioned himself by the door, revolver drawn, and waited. The horses stopped outside. Leather creaked as men dismounted. Footsteps approached. Hale's voice rang out, loud enough to carry through the thin walls. "Mr. Cole, I know you're in there. I know you have my property. This can end two ways. You can return what you stole and face justice for your crimes, or you can refuse and face consequences far more permanent." Ethan didn't respond. Let them wonder. Let them guess. "I'm a patient man," Hale continued, "but my patience has limits. You have 60 seconds to open that door and surrender the documents. After that, we come in and take them, and you won't enjoy the process." Still, Ethan said nothing. He checked the revolver again, though he'd checked it minutes before. 6 shots, 7 men outside. The math was poor. 30 seconds, Mr. Cole." Ben's breathing was quick and shallow from his hiding spot. The boy was terrified, but staying quiet, staying still. Good kid. Brave kid. "Time's up." The door exploded inward, the bar splintering under a heavy boot. 2 men rushed in, silhouettes against the pre-dawn darkness. Ethan fired twice. The first shot took the lead man in the shoulder, spinning him around. The second missed in the chaos and smoke. Then hands were grabbing him, slamming him against the wall. The revolver was torn from his grip. Someone punched him in the gut, driving the air from his lungs. "The documents," Hale's voice, close now. "Where are they?" Ethan struggled to breathe, to think. The ledger was under the cot, barely hidden. If they searched thoroughly, they'd find it in seconds. A lamp flared to life, casting harsh shadows. Hale stood in the doorway, immaculate despite the night's chaos. His eyes scanned the room, found the crate, the cot, the sparse furnishings. "Tear it apart," he ordered. Men moved to obey. One flipped the crate, sending the tin plates and cups crashing. Another grabbed the cot, preparing to lift it. "Wait!" Hale raised a hand. The man froze. "I don't see a boy," Hale said quietly. "Your young ward. Where is he, Mr. Cole?" Ethan's blood went cold. He'd been so focused on the ledger, he'd forgotten that Ben was the other thing Hale wanted. The evidence of Hale's crimes would be damaging, but a witness who could testify was worse. "He's not here," Ethan managed. "Sent him away. Safe." "Liar." Hale's smile was cruel. "You wouldn't let him out of your sight, not after what you paid to free him." He gestured to his men. "Find the boy. He's here somewhere." They searched with brutal efficiency, overturning everything, checking corners and shadows. It was only a matter of time. Then from outside, a new voice cut through the chaos. "That's far enough, Hale. Tell your men to stand down." Marshal Brennan stood in the doorway, shotgun leveled, star glinting on his vest. Behind him were 3 deputies, all armed. Hale turned, surprise flickering across his face before he mastered it. "Marshal, this is a private matter. The apprehension of a thief who broke into my office." "Funny thing about that," Brennan said. "I was doing rounds when I heard the commotion at the registry building, went to investigate, found an office torn apart, a window open, and some very interesting papers scattered on your desk." He gestured with the shotgun. "Papers documenting debt fraud and contract manipulation going back 5 years." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I think you do. See, I also found your safe open and some additional ledgers that make for real interesting reading." Brennan's voice was hard. "You've been running a fraud operation, Hale, buying debts cheap, inflating them, selling people to cover imaginary amounts. That's federal territory, which means it's out of my jurisdiction and into the Marshal Service's hands." Hale's face had gone white. "Those documents are private property. Those documents are evidence of crimes. And whatever Mr. Cole may have done tonight, breaking and entering is a territorial misdemeanor, while what you've been doing is a federal felony." Brennan looked past Hale to Ethan. "You all right, Cole?" "Been better." Ethan straightened, despite the pain in his ribs. "The boy's safe. And there's more evidence here, a ledger that details every fraudulent transaction." "Ben," he called softly, You can come out now. It's over. The boy emerged from behind the crate, dirty and scared but unharmed. He looked at the armed men, at Hale's furious face, at the marshal with his shotgun. Is it really over? Ben asked. Brennan nodded. It's really over, son. Hale made one last attempt. I have rights. I have lawyers. You can't just... I can, and I am. Brennan gestured to his deputies. Take Mr. Hale into custody. Charges are fraud, false imprisonment, and whatever else the federal marshal wants to add when he gets here. He looked at Hale. You wanted to use the law as a weapon. Now you get to find out what happens when it cuts both ways. As the deputies moved to arrest him, Hale's eyes found Ethan. The hatred there was pure and absolute. This isn't finished, he said quietly. You've made an enemy you can't imagine, Cole. I'll take my chances, Ethan replied. They led Hale away, his protests fading into the growing dawn. Brennan lingered, studying Ethan and Ben with an expression that was hard to read. You took a hell of a risk tonight, he said finally. Had to. No one else was going to stop him. Maybe, or maybe you're just too stubborn to know when you're beaten. But there was something like respect in Brennan's voice. Federal marshal will be here in a few days. You'll need to give testimony, hand over that ledger. Think you can manage that? We can manage. Brennan nodded slowly. Then he did something unexpected. He extended his hand. Ethan shook it, feeling calluses and strength in the grip. A lawman's hand, worn from keeping imperfect peace in an imperfect world. You did good, Cole, Brennan said quietly. Not smart, but good. This town needs more people willing to stand up when it matters. Then he was gone, following his deputies and their prisoner into the breaking dawn. Ethan and Ben stood in the wreckage of the shack, surrounded by overturned furniture and scattered belongings. The first rays of sunlight crept through the broken door, painting everything gold. We did it, Ben said wonderingly. We actually did it. We had help, Marcus, Sullivan, even Brennan at the end. Ethan touched the boy's shoulder. But yeah, we did it. Outside, the town was beginning to wake. Soon the news would spread. Hale arrested, his operation exposed, the children he'd sold finally recognized as victims rather than debtors. It wouldn't undo the damage, wouldn't bring back lost years or heal broken families. But it was justice, imperfect and incomplete, but real. And for now, standing in the morning light with a freed boy and a future that looked uncertain but possible, that was enough. The news spread through Carson Flats like wildfire through dry grass. By mid-morning, clusters of people gathered on street corners, voices low and urgent as they traded stories that grew wilder with each retelling. Rourke Hale arrested, his office ransacked, evidence of crimes stretching back years. Some said Ethan Cole had stolen a fortune. Others claimed he'd killed 3 men in a gunfight. The truth was less dramatic but more dangerous. He'd exposed a system that had profited from human misery, and systems didn't die quietly. Ethan spent the morning repairing the shack's door as best he could with scrapped lumber and bent nails, aware of eyes watching from windows and doorways. Some looked curious. Some looked grateful. A few looked hostile, faces of men who'd benefited from Hale's operation or feared what came next when power structures collapsed. Ben helped without being asked, holding boards steady while Ethan hammered, fetching tools, working with the focused intensity of someone who needed to stay busy to keep from thinking too hard. The boy had barely spoken since Brennan left, processing everything that had happened in the compressed chaos of 2 days. They were finishing the repairs when a wagon pulled up, driven by a woman Ethan recognized vaguely from the mercantile. She was perhaps 40, wearing a faded calico dress and a determined expression. Mr. Cole? She climbed down without waiting for help. I'm Martha Henley. My son was sold 2 years ago. Contract labor to a ranch up in Montana Territory. Ethan set down the hammer, wiping sweat from his forehead. Ma'am, I heard what you did. Heard you got proof of what Hale was doing. Her voice shook slightly. My boy Thomas. He was 11 when they took him. Said we owed money for my husband's funeral and medical care. $400 they claimed, though we never saw half those bills. I couldn't pay, so they took Thomas instead. I'm sorry. The words felt inadequate. Sorry don't bring him back, but proof might. She pulled a folded paper from her pocket. This is the contract they made me sign. I kept a copy, though they said it wouldn't matter. Can you use it? When the federal marshal comes, can you show him this? Ethan took the paper, unfolded it carefully. The contract was similar to Ben's: inflated debt, impossible terms, signatures from county officials, and Hale's office. More evidence for a growing pile. Yes, ma'am, I can use it. And my Thomas? Can they find him? Bring him home. That was harder to promise. Montana was 1,000 miles of mountains and plains, ranches scattered across territory where men asked few questions about where their labor came from. Finding one boy among all that distance would take resources and determination. I'll make sure the marshal knows, Ethan said. Can't promise more than that, but I'll make sure he knows. Martha's eyes filled. That's more than anyone else offered. Thank you, Mr. Cole. She left, and before noon, 3 more people arrived with similar stories and similar papers. A father whose daughter had been sold to a laundry in Denver. A grandmother whose grandson disappeared into the mining camps. A widow whose 2 children vanished into the system and never came back. Each one added to the pile of evidence. Each one carved another piece out of Ethan's heart. There's so many, Ben said quietly, watching the 4th visitor depart. I thought maybe I was special, that Mr. Hale targeted me for some reason. But it was just business to him, just numbers in a ledger. That's what makes it worse, Ethan replied. If it was personal, it would be one man's cruelty. This was systematic, industrial. He turned suffering into profit and convinced everyone it was legal. By afternoon, the pile of contracts and testimonies had grown thick enough to require a box. Ethan stored them carefully in the shack's one chest, aware that this evidence represented years of pain and the slim hope of justice. Marshal Brennan arrived as the sun started its descent, accompanied by a man Ethan didn't recognize. Tall, weathered, wearing a federal marshal's badge and carrying himself with the quiet authority of someone who'd seen hard country and harder men. Mr. Cole, this is Federal Marshal James Cartwright, Brennan said. He rode down from Cheyenne soon as I sent word. Cartwright extended his hand. His grip was firm, his eyes sharp and assessing. Heard you've been busy, Mr. Cole. Breaking into offices, stealing documents, generally making a nuisance of yourself. That one way to describe it, Ethan agreed. It's also the way Hale's lawyers are describing it. They've already filed complaints. Theft, trespassing, assault on his men who were exercising their legal right to recover stolen property. Cartwright's expression didn't change. They're pushing hard for your arrest. Ethan's stomach tightened. He'd expected this, but hoped it would come later, after the evidence had done its work. And what do you say to that, Marshal? I say that breaking and entering is a misdemeanor, and exposing a 5-year fraud operation involving the illegal sale of children is a public service. Cartwright pulled a cigar from his pocket, lit it with a match struck on his thumbnail. But I need to see this evidence everyone's talking about. Need to verify it's legitimate and actionable. Ethan brought out the ledger, the contracts, the testimonies, spread them across the crate-turned table while Cartwright examined each page with meticulous care. The federal marshal read slowly, making occasional notes in a small book, his expression growing grimmer with each document. This is comprehensive, he said finally. Documented fraud, false imprisonment, child trafficking disguised as contract labor. You've built a federal case here, Mr. Cole. I just collected what was already there. Hale built the case against himself. Maybe so, but collecting it took courage, and courage is rarer than evidence. Cartwright set down the ledger. Here's how this works. I'm taking Hale into federal custody, transferring him to Cheyenne to await trial. I'm also issuing warrants for his business associates, anyone who knowingly participated in the fraud. That includes some county officials who signed off on these contracts. What about the children? Ben spoke up for the first time, his voice small but determined. The ones already sold. Can you get them back? Cartwright looked at the boy, and something softened in his weathered face. I'll do my best, son. We'll track down every contract, contact every buyer, use federal authority to void the sales, and return the children to their families. It won't be fast, and it won't be easy, but it'll happen. How long? Martha Henley's question from that morning echoed in the silence. Months, probably. Maybe longer for the ones sent out of territory. Cartwright's honesty was brutal but necessary. Some we might not find at all. Trail goes cold, records get lost, people move on, but we'll find as many as we can. It wasn't the answer Ben wanted, wasn't the answer any of them wanted, but it was honest. That counted for something. What happens to Mr. Cole? This from Brennan, who'd been quietly observing. Hale's lawyers are already making noise. They've got connections. Mr. Cole acted to expose federal crimes, Cartwright said. I'll recommend immunity from prosecution for any misdemeanor charges in exchange for his testimony at trial. Can't guarantee it. Ultimately, that's up to a judge. But I carry some weight, and I'll use it. Relief flooded through Ethan, followed immediately by suspicion. Why? You don't know me. Don't owe me anything. No, but I know men like Hale, known too many of them, let too many operate too long because they had money and lawyers and the appearance of legitimacy. Cartwright relit his cigar, which had gone out during his examination of the evidence. Someone needs to stand up to men like that. When someone does, I make it my business to stand with them. They talked for another hour, Cartwright asking detailed questions about the break-in, the document's location in Hale's office, anything that might prove the evidence hadn't been falsified or planted. Ethan answered honestly, holding nothing back. If this was going to work, it needed to be airtight. As the federal marshal prepared to leave, he paused at the door. One more thing, Mr. Cole. Hale's got friends, and some of them aren't the type to wait for legal proceedings. You exposed him, cost him money and reputation. He'll want revenge, and men like him buy it easily enough. Already had one visit from his hired guns, Ethan said. Expect there'll be more. Then I'd suggest you don't make yourself an easy target. Vary your routines, watch your back, keep that revolver close. Cartwright glanced at Ben. And keep the boy safe. He's a witness now, which makes him valuable and vulnerable. After they left, Ethan and Ben sat in the gathering dusk, listening to the town settle into evening routines. The sounds were familiar now, dogs barking, children called home for supper, the distant piano from Sullivan's saloon. Normal sounds of normal life, except nothing felt normal anymore. Are you scared? Ben asked quietly. Terrified, Ethan admitted, but being scared and doing what's right aren't mutually exclusive. Sometimes they go hand in hand. Pa used to say that courage is being scared and doing it anyway. Your pa was a smart man. They ate a cold supper of bread and cheese, neither very hungry, but eating because bodies needed fuel even when minds were exhausted. Ethan was considering how to secure the shack for another night when hoofbeats approached, multiple riders moving fast. He grabbed the revolver, positioned himself by the window. Ben crouched behind the crate without being told, learning the rhythms of danger too quickly for someone so young. But the voice that called out wasn't threatening. Ethan, it's Marcus! Ethan opened the door to find Marcus Drew along with 4 other men, all armed, all mounted on good horses. He recognized 2 of them, ranchers from outside town who'd lost land to Hale's schemes. The others were strangers, but they had the look of men who'd seen hard times and come through it angry. What's this? Ethan asked. Protection detail, Marcus said, swinging down from his horse. Word's out that Hale's people are looking for payback. Figure you could use some friends keeping watch. I can't pay you. Didn't ask you to. One of the ranchers, a grizzled man named Cooper, spat tobacco juice into the dirt. Hale destroyed my ranch 3 years back. False loan terms, forged documents, same tricks he used on everyone. Time someone answered for that. We'll set up a rotation, Marcus explained. 2 men on watch at all times, rotating every 4 hours. Anyone comes for you or the boy, they'll have to go through us first. Ethan felt his throat tighten. After years of being alone, of handling everything himself, having people stand with him felt foreign and overwhelming. I don't know what to say. Don't say nothing. Just let us help. Marcus gripped his shoulder. You stood up when it mattered. A lot of us wish we'd done the same sooner. This is our chance to make that right. They set up camp in a rough perimeter around the shack, building a small fire for coffee and warmth. Ethan watched them work. Men who'd been beaten down by the same system that destroyed him, now choosing to fight back not with lawyers or money, but with simple presence. Being there. Standing together. Ben watched too, eyes wide. I never seen anything like this, he said quietly. People helping just because it's right. Sometimes that's all it takes, Ethan replied. Someone starts, others follow. That's how change happens, not with grand gestures, but with ordinary people deciding enough is enough. The night passed quietly, the watch rotation working smoothly. Ethan managed a few hours of actual sleep, knowing someone was keeping guard. It was a luxury he hadn't experienced since losing his land, the simple security of not being completely alone against the world. Morning brought Sullivan with supplies, coffee, bacon, fresh bread. Figure you boys could use some proper breakfast, he said, distributing the goods. And I brought news. Hale's lawyers showed up at the courthouse this morning, filing motions and making noise. But Cartwright's already moved him to federal custody. He's gone, Ethan, on his way to Cheyenne under armed guard. Relief and unease warred in Ethan's chest. Hale removed from town was good, but Hale in federal custody meant a trial, meant months of legal proceedings, meant becoming a public figure when all he wanted was to disappear into obscurity again. What about his operation? Marcus asked. The business, the properties, all the infrastructure he built? Federal seizure pending trial outcome, Sullivan replied. Everything's frozen until the courts sort it out. Could take months, maybe years. And the people working for him? The guards, the clerks, the ones who enforced his contracts? Scattered. Some left town overnight. Others are claiming ignorance, saying they didn't know about the fraud. Sullivan's expression was cynical. A lot of convenient amnesia going around. Over the next 3 days, the town transformed around them. Without Hale's presence, people started talking openly about things they'd witnessed or suspected. More families came forward with stories of children taken, debts falsified, lives destroyed. Each testimony added weight to the federal case and to the crushing reality of how long the corruption had festered. Ethan spent hours with Cartwright's deputy, giving detailed statements, walking through the timeline of events, explaining how each piece of evidence connected to the larger pattern. Ben gave his own testimony, speaking with quiet dignity about his parents' deaths, the sudden debt claims, his time in the cell awaiting auction. You're doing real good, son, the deputy told Ben. Speaking truth takes courage, especially when it's painful truth. Mr. Cole says courage is being scared and doing it anyway, Ben replied. I'm scared all the time. So I guess I'm real courageous. The deputy smiled. Guess you are. On the 4th day, Martha Henley returned with news. They found him, she said, tears streaming down her face. Found my Thomas. He was at a ranch outside Billings, working as a stable hand. The federal marshal up there got word from Cartwright, rode out and brought him back. He's coming home, Mr. Cole. My boy's coming home. It was the first recovery, but not the last. Over the following weeks, word came of other children found and returned. Not all of them. Some trails led nowhere. Some children had disappeared too completely, but enough to prove the system could work when people demanded it. Through it all, the watch rotation continued. Marcus and his volunteers maintained their guard, turning away 2 more groups of men who approached the shack with unclear intentions. No shots were fired, but the presence of armed, determined men protecting Ethan and Ben sent a clear message. There would be consequences for violence. Yet despite the small victories, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something was building. Hale was gone, but his influence remained, woven through town relationships and business dealings. Men who'd profited from his schemes wouldn't surrender that profit quietly. And somewhere, people loyal to Hale or simply angry at exposure would be planning something. The feeling proved prophetic when Sullivan arrived one evening, face grim. Got word from a freight driver who came through from Cheyenne, he said, without preamble. Hale's lawyers are pushing hard to get him released on bail pending trial. Arguing he's a respected businessman, no flight risk, deserves presumption of innocence. Will it work? Ethan asked. Might. Federal judge is known to be sympathetic to property owners. If Hale can post bail, and he's got resources hidden that weren't seized, he could be back in Carson Flats within a week. The implications hung heavy in the evening air. Hale released meant Hale free to act, to intimidate witnesses, to use his remaining influence to poison the trial before it began. Then we need to be ready, Marcus said. If he comes back to a town that's not afraid of him anymore. Easy to say, Cooper muttered. Harder to do when he's got money for hired guns and we've got families to protect. Which is exactly why we stand together, Marcus countered. Divided, We're vulnerable. Together, we're something he can't ignore or intimidate. The debate continued into the night, men arguing about strategy and risk, about what they owed to justice versus what they owed to their family's safety. Ethan listened, recognizing the fear beneath the bravado. These were good men, but they'd been beaten down by years of systematic oppression. Standing up required believing that standing mattered. Ben tugged at Ethan's sleeve. "Can I say something?" The men fell quiet, looking at the small boy who'd become the face of their resistance. "I was in that cell," Ben said, voice steady despite his size, "waiting to be sold like I was cattle. I heard other kids crying, saw families torn apart, watched people give up hope because the system was too big and too powerful to fight." He looked around at the assembled faces. Mr. Cole could have walked past that cell, could have ignored me like everyone else did, but he didn't. He stood up when it was stupid and dangerous and impossible, and because he did, I'm free. Other kids are coming home. The system that hurt us is breaking. He paused, gathering courage. If Mr. Hale comes back, we can't let fear win, can't let him think that buying his way out of jail means getting away with what he did. We have to show him, show everyone, that some things are worth fighting for no matter how scared we are. Ben's eyes shone. I'm just a kid. I got nothing except my freedom and the people who fought for it. But I'll stand with Mr. Cole against Mr. Hale or anyone else, because that's what you do when someone gives you back your life. Silence followed his words. Then Cooper cleared his throat roughly. Kid's right. We've been running from Hale's shadow too long. Time we stood in the light and made him face what he's done. Agreed, another man said. Whatever comes, we face it together. One by one, the men nodded, a decision crystallizing without formal vote or declaration. They would stand. They would fight if necessary. They would not surrender the ground they'd gained. Marcus looked at Ethan. If Hale gets out, he'll come for you first. You're the one who exposed him, the one who took his ledger. He'll want revenge. Let him come, Ethan said quietly. I'm done running. The words carried weight he hadn't expected, a finality that settled into his bones. For 3 years he'd been running, from his wife's death, from his land's loss, from his own failure to prevent either. He'd run from responsibility and meaning, from connection and purpose, hiding in day labor and cheap whiskey, and the safe numbness of not caring. Ben had changed that, stopped him mid-flight and given him something worth stopping for, reminded him that choosing not to act was still a choice, and sometimes the hardest choice was the only right one. Then we prepare, Marcus said. Make this shack defensible as possible, establish fallback positions, make sure everyone knows the plan if violence comes. They worked through the night, men who'd been strangers weeks ago now moving with coordinated purpose, reinforcing walls, stockpiling water and ammunition, creating sight lines and defensive positions, transforming a pathetic shack into something approaching a fortress. As dawn broke, painting the horizon in shades of red and gold, Ethan stood with Ben watching the men work. You think he'll come? Ben asked. I think men like Hale don't forgive being exposed. Whether he comes himself or sends others doesn't matter. Someone's coming. Then we'll be ready. We'll be ready, Ethan agreed. The sun climbed higher, burning off the morning cool. In town, people were waking to another day, going about their lives with the fragile hope that maybe, finally, things could be different. That corruption could be challenged, that justice could exist, that ordinary people could stand against power and win. Whether that hope survived what came next remained to be seen. But standing in the morning light, surrounded by men who'd chosen to stand with him, Ethan Cole felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. He felt like maybe, just maybe, he could be the man his wife believed he was. The man who stood up when it mattered. The man who kept his promises. The man who didn't run. The word came on the 7th day, delivered by a rider who galloped into town at mid-morning and went straight to Marshal Brennan's office. Within the hour, Brennan himself appeared at the shack, his face carefully neutral in a way that meant bad news. Hale posted bail, he said without preamble. Judge ruled him a low flight risk, given his property holdings and business ties. He's being released into recognizance pending trial. Ethan absorbed this, feeling the weight of inevitability settle over him. When? He'll be back in Carson Flats by tomorrow evening, maybe sooner if he pushes hard. Brennan glanced at the fortified shack, at Marcus and the other men maintaining their watch. I can't stop him from returning to his own property, can't arrest him without new charges, but I can make sure he knows I'm watching, that the law is watching. With respect, Marshal, the law's been watching him for 5 years and didn't do much about it. Brennan's jaw tightened, but he didn't dispute it. Fair point, but things are different now. Federal involvement, documented evidence, witnesses willing to testify. He can't operate the way he used to. Maybe not openly, Marcus said from his position by the reinforced door, but men like Hale know how to work in shadows, how to make problems disappear without getting their own hands dirty. Which is why I'm telling you to be careful, all of you. Brennan looked at each man in turn. Hale comes back. He'll be looking for revenge disguised as justice. He'll claim you stole from him, assaulted his men, destroyed his property. He'll use every legal mechanism he can to hurt you while staying clean himself. So what do we do? Ben asked quietly. Just wait for him to come after us? You keep doing what you're doing. Stay together, stay alert, and trust that the federal case is solid enough to put him away regardless of what he tries. Brennan pulled out a piece of paper, handed it to Ethan. This is Cartwright's telegraph address in Cheyenne. Anything happens, anything at all, you send word immediately. Federal marshal's authority trumps local jurisdiction, and he's made clear he's personally invested in this case. After Brennan left, the men gathered to discuss strategy. The mood was tense, expectant, like the air before a thunderstorm. We could leave, Cooper suggested. Take the boy, head north into Wyoming territory. Start fresh where Hale's reach doesn't extend. Running just means he wins, Ethan replied. Means the next person who stands up to him will be alone. And the one after that. Someone has to draw a line. Noble sentiment, but nobility don't stop bullets. No, but witnesses do. Federal charges do. Public scrutiny does. Ethan gestured to the town beyond their defensive perimeter. We're not alone anymore. People know what Hale did. They've seen evidence, heard testimony. He can't just make this disappear. He can try, Marcus said grimly, and trying might involve making us disappear instead. They fortified their position further, establishing clear lines of communication with sympathetic townspeople who could serve as early warning if Hale's men mobilized. Sullivan agreed to keep watch from the saloon, which had clear sight lines to both the land registry building and the road from Cheyenne. Martha Henley and several other mothers whose children had been recovered volunteered to spread word if they heard anything suspicious. A network was forming, fragile but real. People who'd been isolated and afraid were connecting, sharing information, watching each other's backs. It was the opposite of what Hale's system required. Silence, separation, fear that kept everyone in their own corner hoping not to be noticed. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat outside the shack under a sky scattered with stars, listening to the quiet sounds of men on watch, the distant bark of dogs, the whisper of wind through dry grass. Ben emerged from the shack and sat beside him without speaking. You thinking about tomorrow? The boy asked eventually. Thinking about a lot of things. Tomorrow's part of it. You scared? Terrified, Ethan admitted. But fear's not the problem. Problem is letting fear make your decisions for you. Ben was quiet for a moment, then said, When I was in that cell, waiting to be sold, I was so scared I couldn't think straight, just kept imagining all the terrible things that might happen. But then you showed up and made that promise, and suddenly I had something besides fear to focus on, had hope, even when hope seemed stupid. Hope's never stupid. Sometimes it's all we've got. That's what I mean, though. You gave me hope when I had nothing else, and that hope kept me alive until you could actually save me. Ben looked up at the stars. So now I'm thinking maybe that's what we got to do for each other. Keep giving hope even when we're scared. Keep reminding ourselves there's something worth fighting for. Ethan felt something crack open in his chest, some frozen place that had been sealed since his wife's death. This child who'd survived abandonment and cruelty, who'd been reduced to property and nearly sold into servitude, was teaching him about resilience and hope. When this is over, Ethan said quietly, when Hale's in prison and the trials are done and things settle down, I want to make this official, want to become your legal guardian, if you'll have me. Give you a real home, not just a shack and a promise. Ben's eyes went wide in the starlight. You mean that? Mean it more than anything I've said in 3 years. But you don't know me. Don't know if I'm worth the trouble. Ben Fletcher, you stop right there. Ethan turned to face him fully. You're worth every bit of trouble and then some. You're brave and smart and kind despite everything that's tried to beat those qualities out of you. Any man would be lucky to call you son. Tears tracked down Ben's dirty face. My pa used to say something like that. Before he got hurt, before everything went bad. Said I was his greatest achievement, better than any building he ever constructed. He was right. They sat together in the darkness, two people who'd been broken by circumstances beyond their control, choosing to rebuild together. Not because it was easy or safe or guaranteed to work, but because the alternative was surrendering to the cruelty that had tried to destroy them. Dawn came with false tranquility, the sun rising over a town that looked peaceful and ordinary. But tension hummed beneath the surface, everyone waiting for the other boot to drop. Hale arrived just after noon. He rode in at the head of a group of 8 men, all armed, all carrying themselves with the professional menace of hired muscle. They stopped at the land registry building, and Hale dismounted with the careful movements of someone aware they were being watched. He looked thinner than before, his expensive suit hanging slightly loose, but his eyes held the same cold calculation. Within minutes, Sullivan sent a runner with word. Hale was in his office, meeting with lawyers. The men he'd brought were spreading through town, making their presence known, asking pointed questions about who'd testified against their employer. Intimidation campaign, Marcus said flatly. Classic technique. Make witnesses afraid to speak. Make allies regret their support. Then we make sure it doesn't work. Ethan checked the revolver at his belt. People need to see we're not backing down. He walked into town with Marcus beside him and Ben following despite Ethan's suggestion he stay behind. The boy was right. This affected him too, and hiding sent the wrong message. They went to Sullivan's saloon first, making their presence visible. Then to the general store where Ethan bought supplies he didn't strictly need but paid for in full in public view. Then to Martha Henley's boarding house where several of the mothers had gathered. He's back, Martha said unnecessarily. His men came by asking who'd given statements to the federal marshal, asking if people understood that false testimony was a crime. It's theater, Ethan replied. He wants you scared so you'll recant, say you were mistaken or coerced. But the evidence isn't just testimony. It's documents, ledgers, contracts with his signature. Our statements just confirm what the paper trail already proves. Easy to say when you're not the one with children to protect. This from another woman, younger, clutching her daughter's hand. If something happens to us because we spoke up, then the federal government gets involved with witness intimidation charges on top of everything else, Marcus interrupted. Hale's walking a razor edge right now. He pushes too hard. He gives Cartwright exactly the ammunition needed to revoke bail and add new charges. But what if he doesn't care about that? The woman persisted. What if he just wants revenge? Consequences be damned. It was a valid fear, one Ethan shared. Men backed into corners, sometimes stopped calculating, and started lashing out. Then we deal with it together, he said. Same way we've dealt with everything else. Not alone, not scattered and afraid, but together. The conversation continued, Ethan and Marcus reinforcing courage, reminding people what they'd already survived and why they'd chosen to speak up in the first place. Slowly, fearfully, the mothers recommitted to their testimony. They'd seen their children come home or received word they'd been found. That was worth protecting, worth fighting for. As they left the boarding house, one of Hale's men intercepted them on the street. He was tall, scarred, wearing a gun belt and an expression that promised violence. Mr. Hale would like a word, he said. Private conversation, just the two of you. Tell Mr. Hale if he wants to talk, he can find me at the marshal's office. In public, with witnesses. That's not how this works. That's exactly how this works. Ethan kept his voice level, aware of people watching from windows and doorways. Your boss wants to intimidate me into silence or recanting, but I've got nothing to recant and no interest in being intimidated. So unless you've got legal business, we're done here. The hired gun's hand drifted toward his weapon. Marcus shifted slightly, his own hand near his rifle. The street went very quiet. Then Marshal Brennan's voice cut through the tension. Problem here, gentlemen. The lawman appeared from the direction of his office, shotgun cradled casually, badge catching the afternoon sun. No problem, the hired gun said after a beat. Just delivering a message. Message delivered then. I suggest you move along. The man left, but his eyes promised that this wasn't over. Ethan watched him go, feeling the weight of escalation. They'd crossed another threshold, moved from legal maneuvering to physical confrontation. What came next would likely be worse. You boys are poking a bear, Brennan said quietly, once the man was out of earshot. Bear was already poked the moment we exposed what Hale's been doing, Ethan replied. We're just refusing to run from it. Brave and stupid often look identical. Just make sure you know which one you're choosing. That evening, Ethan called a meeting of everyone who'd been supporting their effort. 23 people gathered in the space behind Sullivan's saloon, men who'd lost land, women who'd lost children, workers who'd been exploited, townspeople who were simply tired of living under Hale's shadow. Hale's back and he's making moves, Ethan began, trying to scare witnesses, intimidate supporters, create enough fear that the federal case falls apart. Some of you are probably wondering if speaking up was worth it, if the risk is too high. Several people nodded, faces troubled. I can't tell you it'll be safe. Can't promise Hale won't retaliate or that fighting back won't cost something. But I can tell you what happens if we don't fight. Ethan gestured toward Ben, standing near the back. Children keep getting sold, families keep getting destroyed. Good people keep getting ground down by a system that treats them like property. And men like Hale keep winning because we're too afraid to stop them. But what can we actually do? Cooper asked. He's got money, lawyers, hired guns. We've got good intentions and desperation. We've got the truth, Martha Henley said, stepping forward. We've got evidence and witnesses and the federal government paying attention. That's more than we've ever had before. She's right, Sullivan added. Hale's power was built on secrecy and fear. We've broken the secrecy by exposing his operation. Now we break the fear by refusing to back down. Easy to say, someone muttered. Harder to do when men with guns come calling. Which is why we stand together, Marcus said. Alone, any of us is vulnerable. Together, we're something he can't easily attack without making himself look like exactly the criminal we've accused him of being. The debate continued, fear and courage trading arguments. But gradually, painfully, a consensus emerged. They would hold firm, would maintain their testimony, would support each other against intimidation. As the meeting broke up, Ethan pulled Ben aside. I need you to do something for me. Something important. Anything. I need you to write down everything you remember about your time in that cell. Every detail. Who you saw, what they said, which guards were involved, which county officials came through. Everything. Why? I already gave testimony to the federal marshal. Insurance. If something happens to me, if Hale's men succeed in silencing the primary witnesses, your written account becomes evidence that can't be intimidated or killed. Ethan gripped the boy's shoulder. I'm not planning on anything happening, but plans and reality don't always match. Ben's face went pale, but he nodded. I'll write it all down, tonight. Good boy. And Ben, if things go bad, if you see violence coming, you run. Don't try to be brave, don't try to help. You just run to Marshal Brennan's office and you don't leave until it's safe. I'm not leaving you. You'll do what I tell you because that's what keeps you alive to testify, to make sure everything we've done matters. Ethan softened his tone. I need you alive and safe more than I need you beside me in a fight. Understand? Reluctantly, Ben agreed. They returned to the shack as sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and purple. The watch rotation was in full effect, men positioned at key points, everyone on edge. The night felt heavy with anticipation, like the air before a storm finally breaks. Ethan was checking the door barricade when Marcus appeared, face grim. Got word from one of Sullivan's people. Hale's men are gathering at the old stable on the south edge of town. A lot of them, all armed, all looking like they're preparing for something. How many? 15, maybe 20. More than we've got unless we pull everyone in from the perimeter, which leaves us exposed. Ethan's mind raced through options. They could ford up in the shack, try to hold against superior numbers. Could scatter and hide, make themselves difficult targets. Could go on offense, confront Hale's force before they mobilized. None of the options were good. "We need help," he said finally. "Real help, not just townspeople with good intentions." "Already sent a rider to Cheyenne," Marcus replied. "But even pushing hard, Cartwright can't get here before tomorrow afternoon. We need to survive tonight first." That's when Brennan arrived, moving fast, accompanied by his 3 deputies. "Hale's planning something," the marshal said without preamble. "I can feel it. My deputies saw his men stockpiling weapons, heard them talking about cleaning up loose ends and sending a message." "Can you arrest them? Stop it before it starts?" "On what charge? Owning weapons isn't illegal and talking tough isn't conspiracy. I need evidence of intent to commit a specific crime, and right now all I've got is a bad feeling." "So we wait for them to attack, then respond? Or we force their hand in a way that protects the innocent?" Brennan looked at Ethan with calculation. "They want you and the evidence you're holding. What if we give them a target they can't resist but control the circumstances?" "You mean a trap?" "I mean we position you somewhere defensible, somewhere with clear lines of sight and limited approaches. Let word slip where you'll be. When they come, we're ready. Legitimate law enforcement defending against armed assault." It was risky, using Ethan as bait, but it had one major advantage. It drew the fight away from the townspeople, away from Ben, away from anyone who couldn't defend themselves. "Where?" Ethan asked. "The old mine office, 2 miles north of town. Stone building, solid walls, 1 entrance. We can defend it with the men we've got, and it's isolated enough that stray shots won't hit innocent people." "And if they don't take the bait?" "Then we've wasted a night. But my gut says they will. Hale's running out of time, trial's approaching, witnesses are holding firm, federal marshals breathing down his neck. He needs to act now or lose everything." They had 2 hours to prepare. Brennan sent deputies to quietly spread word that Ethan was moving the evidence to the old mine office for safekeeping, that he'd be there overnight with minimal protection. The story was plausible enough to be believed, a man trying to secure vital documents in a more defensible location. Meanwhile, Ethan, Marcus, and 8 other armed men took positions inside and around the stone building. It was exactly as Brennan described. Thick walls, narrow windows, perfect for defensive fire. 1 main entrance that could be barricaded and monitored. Ben remained in town, hidden at the marshal's office under the protection of a deputy with strict orders not to leave no matter what happened. "You be safe," Ben had said, gripping Ethan's hand hard enough to hurt. "You promised we'd be a family. Can't be a family if you get yourself killed." "I'll be safe," Ethan promised. "And when this is done, we'll start that family proper, maybe even find some land, build something real." Now, sitting in the darkness of the mine office, with a rifle across his lap and the weight of coming violence pressing down, Ethan wondered if he'd been lying, if promises made to children were just pretty words before ugly reality. They came at midnight. The sound reached them first. Horses moving through darkness, men speaking in low voices. Marcus whistled softly from his position at the window. 20+ riders. They're not even trying to be subtle. Brennan, positioned near the door, called out when they were 50 yards away. "That's far enough. You're approaching a law enforcement operation. State your business or turn back." A voice replied from the darkness, not Hale himself, but one of his lieutenants. "We're here for stolen property, documents taken illegally from Mr. Hale's office. We're exercising our legal right to recover them. Those documents are federal evidence in an ongoing investigation. You've got no legal claim to them." "Then we'll take them anyway." Muzzle flashes lit the night. Bullets hammered into stone walls, shattered window glass, kicked up splinters from the door frame. The defenders returned fire, carefully aimed shots, forcing the attackers to scatter and take cover behind rocks and scrub. The battle was loud and chaotic, nothing like the clean violence of dime novels. Men shouted, weapons cracked and boomed, horses screamed. Ethan fired at shadows and movement. Impossible to tell if his shots found targets. Beside him, Cooper took a round through the shoulder and went down cursing. "Keep pressure on them," Brennan shouted. "Don't let them organize a rush." The attackers tried twice to storm the entrance, both times driven back by concentrated fire from the narrow windows. Bodies littered the approach, not corpses, but wounded men crawling for cover, their moans audible between gunshots. Then came a lull, both sides catching breath and assessing damage. "Brennan!" The voice from the darkness was different now, strained. "This is pointless. Give us coal and the documents and we withdraw. Nobody else has to die." "Can't do that," Brennan called back. "Coal's under federal protection and those documents are evidence. You want them, you go through proper legal channels." "There are no proper channels for what we want." More gunfire, this time heavier, more organized. They were preparing for a final push, Ethan realized. Throw everything at the defenders, overwhelm them through sheer numbers and firepower. He was reloading when he heard it. Horses approaching from the south. Many horses, moving fast. Had Hale brought reinforcements? Then a new voice cut through the chaos, amplified by a speaking trumpet and backed by unmistakable authority. "This is Federal Marshal James Cartwright. You are engaged in armed assault against lawful authority and witnesses in a federal investigation. Throw down your weapons immediately or face additional charges including attempted murder of federal witnesses." Ethan risked a glance out the window. Torches illuminated at least 30 mounted men wearing federal badges, rifles trained on Hale's forces. The shooting stopped. In the sudden silence, broken only by groans from wounded men and the nervous stamping of horses, Cartwright spoke again. "You've got 10 seconds to disarm and surrender. Anyone still holding a weapon after that gets charged as an accessory to everything your employer did, plus attempted murder, plus assaulting federal officers. And I promise you those charges will stick and you will hang for them." Weapons clattered to the ground. Men raised their hands, faces pale in the torchlight. "Where's Hale?" Cartwright demanded, riding forward with his men spreading to surround the attackers. "I know he's behind this. Where is he?" "Gone," one of the hired guns said bitterly. "Paid us to attack, then rode out before the shooting started. Said he'd be back once Cole was dealt with." "Coward to the end," Marcus muttered. Cartwright's men secured the prisoners while the federal marshal himself approached the mine office. "Everyone all right in there?" "One wounded, nothing fatal," Brennan called back. "How'd you get here so fast? We only sent word this afternoon." "I was already on my way. Heard about Hale's bail release and figured he'd try something stupid." Cartwright surveyed the scene. Wounded men being tended, weapons confiscated, prisoners secured. "Looks like I figured right." They emerged from the mine office into chaos being methodically organized. Federal deputies cataloged evidence, took statements, provided first aid. Hale's hired guns sat bound and sullen, realizing they'd been used as pawns in a game that was never going to end well for them. "Where do you think Hale went?" Ethan asked. "Probably trying to run, get out of territory before we can lock him down." Cartwright lit a cigar, the ember glowing in the darkness. "But I sent men to watch the roads and the train station. He won't get far." He was right. Word came at dawn. Hale had been arrested trying to board a train to Chicago, carrying falsified documents and a substantial amount of cash. He'd made it 12 miles before federal deputies caught up with him. The man who'd terrorized Carson Flats for 5 years, who'd sold children and destroyed families and perverted justice into profit, was taken into custody wearing manacles and facing charges that would ensure he never hurt anyone again. The aftermath stretched across weeks. Trials, testimony, legal proceedings that ground through the machinery of federal justice with agonizing slowness. But the outcome was never really in doubt. The evidence was overwhelming, the witnesses credible, the crimes too documented to dispute. Rourke Hale was convicted on 14 counts of fraud, 6 counts of false imprisonment, and 3 counts of child trafficking. The judge sentenced him to 23 years in federal prison, to be served in a facility far from the territories where he'd operated. His hired guns received their own sentences, ranging from probation for those who'd merely followed orders to prison time for those who'd participated in violence. The county officials who'd signed off on falsified contracts lost their positions and faced their own legal consequences. And slowly, painfully, children began coming home. Not all of them. Some had died in the mines or on remote ranches, their fates lost to distance and indifference. Some had been sold so far away that tracking them proved impossible with available resources. But 17 children were recovered and reunited with families who'd thought they were lost forever. Martha Henley's son Thomas was among them. Ethan was there the day he arrived, watching mother and son embrace with tears streaming down both faces. The boy was thinner than his mother remembered, marked by hard labor and harder treatment, but alive. Healing would take time, but they'd have that time together. As summer turned toward autumn, Ethan made good on his promise. The legal papers declaring him Ben Fletcher's guardian were signed, notarized, and filed with territorial authorities. They found a small piece of land outside town. Nothing like the ranch Ethan had lost, but enough for a garden, a few animals, a place to build. Marcus helped them construct a cabin, real walls and a sound roof, windows that let in light, and a door that locked from the inside. It was honest work with honest materials, and every nail Ethan drove felt like reclaiming something he'd thought lost forever. Ben proved himself adept at everything he touched. The boy learned carpentry from the building process, took to gardening with patience Ethan envied, and showed a natural way with the horses they acquired. More than that, he brought laughter back into Ethan's life. Terrible jokes and silly songs, and the ordinary joy of someone who'd been given a second chance and knew it. On a clear October afternoon with the cabin complete, and the first frost still weeks away, they stood together on their small porch watching the sun set over distant mountains. "You ever think about your wife?" Ben asked quietly. "About what she'd think of all this?" Ethan considered the question. "Every day. I think she'd be proud, not of me specifically, but of the fact that something good came from all that pain. That losing her led eventually to saving you, to stopping Hale, to all those kids going home. You think that makes the loss worth it?" "No. Loss is never worth it. But finding purpose in the aftermath, finding ways to heal by helping others heal, that's what makes life worth living after loss." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from blue to orange to purple. Somewhere in town, Sullivan was opening his saloon for the evening trade. Martha Henley was making supper for Thomas, probably overcooking it like she had every night since his return. Marcus was working his own reclaimed land, rebuilding what Hale had tried to destroy. And here, on this small piece of earth purchased with money earned from honest work, two people who'd been broken by the same corrupt system were building something new, not perfect, not painless, but real and honest, and theirs. "I got a letter from the Territorial Education Board," Ben said suddenly. "They're opening a school in Carson Flats, proper school with a real teacher and everything. They asked if I'd be interested in attending." "What'd you tell them?" "That I'd need to ask my guardian first." Ben looked up at Ethan with a shy smile. "So I'm asking, can I go to school?" Ethan felt his throat tighten with emotion too large for words. This child who'd been treated as property, who'd been denied future and hope and basic dignity, asking permission to learn, to grow, to become whatever he might be. "Of course you can go to school. You can go to college if you want, become a lawyer or a doctor or whatever you dream of being. Maybe I'll be a carpenter, build things that last like Pa did, like you're doing now. Whatever you choose, you'll be good at it. You've got that kind of heart." As darkness settled and stars began appearing overhead, they went inside to the warm glow of lamplight and the smell of stew cooking. Simple domesticity, ordinary as breathing, precious as gold. The debt that had started this journey, Ben's manufactured obligation to Hale, was long since voided. But the real debt, the one Ethan owed to a scared boy who'd reminded him what courage looked like, could never be fully repaid. He could only honor it by living well, by being the man that boy believed he was, by building a life and a family and a future worth the risks they'd taken. Outside, the wind whispered through new-planted fields. Somewhere, Rourke Hale sat in a prison cell, his empire reduced to memories and regrets. Somewhere, children slept safe in their own beds, nightmares of being sold slowly fading. And here, in a small cabin on the edge of Carson Flats, a broken man and a rescued boy sat down to supper together, choosing hope over fear and family over solitude. The promise was kept. The debt was ended. The story was complete. But the living, the real work of building something beautiful from ashes and pain, was just beginning.